learn a little bit more about what you guys call human-centered design. Um, and I promoted the event on LinkedIn and wanted to attend just to help encourage people to learn from you
Oh,
guys because I think you have an amazing tool set to offer. So you deserve to have all the people in your cohorts you can possibly cram in.
oh, thank you so much, James. That's lovely. We've definitely noticed you. Like when we're looking through YouTube or social media, it's always James Gilchrist doing shout outs for us. So super, super grateful when we talk about it as a team. So yeah, thank you so much for coming and supporting us.
Sure, sure.
It's awesome. It's great to meet you like in person too, virtually. I know so much
Likewise.
about you. I've never actually seen
Likewise. Yeah, yeah.
you. Awesome. Any other questions before we get into them? Right, I reckon get into the first pre-collected one, Vic. Let's get the ball rolling.
All right. The first question is, how do you keep the human in the center of AI future?
That is a good question. So Kim and I had a chat about this yesterday when it came through. We've both got our own thoughts. So I'm going to share some thoughts that I have first. And then Kim has actually recorded her thoughts on that and wanted to share it. So we'll play that next. So incorporating the human in AI, I think like chat GPT is something that everyone's starting to, well, a lot of people are starting to experiment with to help us to design learning solutions. I've had a little play with it to see how it can support us better. But I think what's important is one element that stands out for me is the bias that can come through AI tools. So whilst it can help you get to a certain point and it might help you come up with ideas or like word something differently, I think it's important to also apply your own knowledge of the audience or the human that you're designing for. So if I do use it, I might get some content, but then I make sure that I look at the persona that we've created. I look at the user interviews that we've had, all the content that's come from the learners themselves, and make sure that it actually aligns with what they've told us. And of course, like there's no bias playing out because it is pulling from what other people have put into the system, what's on the internet, and there is a lot of bias out there. So just making sure and checking, doing that human check to make sure that there isn't that bias playing out. So I think that's an important part of it. I think also testing it with people. So even if the AI creates something for you that you think will work for your audience, it's so important to test it. So let it create its theme, test it with your audience, let them tell you whether it makes sense to them, whether it fits into their context, whether it works for their world, and then adapt it to make sure that it works for them. So I think that's a way that you can ensure the human element is incorporated. I don't think it can be all completely AI doing the work for you. I think you definitely need to use your human-centered design skills and the information you've collected to get it right for your audience. So that's my thoughts on it. Would anyone else like to share their thoughts?
I'd weigh in on that. That was not my question. So whoever asked the question, thanks for asking.
It's a good question.
Um, yeah, it is a really good question. Um, I'll say that in the past 6 months, I've experimented a bit with AI, more on the image generating properties that
Oh,
it
wow.
has, that it makes possible. I really liked the idea that I could create courses for my clients that had completely unique imagery. Obviously, AI generally has sort of a thematic, like you can almost tell which AI machine generated it and based on what sorts of prompts. But you
Mm.
can still generate some very unique materials. It can affect the mood of the course. You can obviously bring in animated avatars. And that sort of approach has been appreciated so far by my clients. However, I do most of my work in the sphere of corporate finance and financial services. And one thing that I've learned is that AI hasn't caught up everywhere, meaning there
Mm.
could be information that is thought of to be the standard information that you would expect to find about securities, for example. But if you are looking to build a course on a specialized type of security and you ask questions that even if they're specific, you can get answers that are essentially wrong. So the idea that it can help if you want to generate some sort of placeholder content on a topic. But if you show that to your client before you yourself have vetted it and made sure that it's actually on the right track, it can leave a bad taste in their mouth. It can give them an impression that you don't necessarily want to give them. So I've had to be very careful, and generally I've gotten more pushback than, interest in my line of work. So I'm looking forward to see how the AI mind grows. And, but I think one of the most important things for us to realize as we experiment is that AI fundamentally is only as good as what goes in, so
yeah,
those are my thoughts.
Love that. What programs do you use for the images, James?
So Midjourney I've used Bing's Microsoft Bing's solution. I've used ChatGPT. I've used Bard. So I've dabbled in a few.
Yeah, wow, very cool. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome insight. Love that. All right, did you want to play Kim's thoughts, Vic?
Yeah.
Let's see what she thinks.
Hey team, hey everyone.
I just want to check, did everyone hear that tiny? Yeah. Okay.
In the webinar and watching the recording, thanks for coming along and for choosing to learn with us. It means more than you realize. I wanted to give a response to one of the questions that's come in, which is how do you keep the human in the center of the AI future? Here's my thoughts. What if you thought of AI as just another human being who can learn like you, another human who can do things such as come up with ideas, adapt and improve just like you, another being that can do something that impacts you positively and or negatively, which you can't control. Just like every other 7 billion plus humans that you've been existing with so far. I'm curious, what if you thought of AI as just another human being? Can't wait to hear how this discussion plays out.
Whoa. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I've never heard of that perspective before. Kim actually hasn't shared that with us, so it's really cool.
Ash, I'm going to defer to you. Yeah, there you go. Your mic's
good.
up. I was like,
yeah, that's really awesome take on it. It's it makes you think of it very differently instead of just a tool, but something that can learn along the way. And I think as those tools develop, we will have more input into how they learn and what they learn and what sort of information they might be using to assist us. I use them quite heavily, particularly the chat one. I want to get into the imagery stuff. I do love the ability to generate lots of content and then manipulate that content, especially for learner levels and that sort of stuff. But yeah, the risks are that you are creating stuff that's out of date or not quite correct and that sort of stuff. So there is a lot of fact checking, but it does definitely help the thinking or reduce the cognitive load for the designer when you're able to manipulate content so quickly.
Definitely. Thanks, Ash. Awesome perspective. You go, James.
So I was just going to ask, I was going to throw the question back to you, Hannah, like how much has your team done and invested in this human AI, I mean, if you think about a human as someone who's potentially someone on your team, right?
Yeah. I would say we probably haven't done a lot with it. I'm not sure if you use it, Vic, for your development type tasks.
No, I've really only used it for sometimes if I've needed help with emails to clients.
Yeah, that is helpful.
For that, getting the right language and things. yeah, that's like the extent I've taken it to. But it's still, yeah, very much like I might put in the kind of email I want to send, but like I'm very picky about the bits that I pull out of it.
Yes. Yeah, so it's like you're vetting it at the end, making sure that it's actually meeting what you're after.
Yeah. It's just like a little easy thing when, you know, when you're sitting there and you're like, I can't think of like the right word for that, or I want to say this, I'm like 100% happy with how I've worded it. Just at this stage, that's all I'm getting ideas from for it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm probably using it more for currently like the creative writing side of things. So for example, if I'm creating a e-learning solution and I want to make it into like, for example, like a game or something, I might ask it for like game titles that incorporate this topic. I have done it for scenarios as well, where I get it to like, I give it context, give ChatGPT context and get it to spit back a scenario, but I don't think I've ever used like exactly what it gives me. Like we're talking about, I'm always like adapting it, making sure it aligns with the end user, suits the client's writing style and tone and all of that. But it probably has been for more like the creative writing, like, email subjects for our newsletter, that sort of thing. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. I have used it like when we've had certain resources where I need it to be said in a certain tone. So for example, if I want it to sound like quirky or I want it to sound like a resource that already exists in the world, I would like ask it to rewrite what I've written in that tone. And that's been really cool to see that. I think it's just like, for me, like an additional, it's like a second creative brain that I use to add creativity and a bit of like wow factor to what we create. So that's currently where we're at with it. I'm not 100% how much Kim uses it at the moment. But yeah, we don't have any team processes or anything that tell us that we do use it or we should be using it. We're sort of just discovering and learning about it at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find it really interesting how Kim said it's like a person. Like that resonates so much because it is like, it has, everyone like has some form of bias or has like their perspective on the world. And so does ChatGPT. So I think that's like a really interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
I noticed that Bale is weighing in on the chat.
Oh, awesome.
So I wanted to acknowledge that and maybe read that out into the meeting.
Did you want to read it, Vic?
Yes. So he's mentioned unique and cohesive images. I don't know if that was early in the conversation. And he said, I'll have to sit with the idea of AI as another human. I predominantly use it to synthesize text, pass out extras, and distill it down to essential components and then go through again.
Love that. I agree. I feel like I'm on the same page as you, Bailey. Thanks for that insight. And sorry we missed that in the chat. I'll make sure I'm keeping an eye on it. All is well. Thank you.
I've just had an idea that I've never had before. As we're thinking about AI, I'm a sole proprietor at Lighthouse, so I don't often get to have team meetings unless I'm talking to myself. So this is another reason why this sort of a meeting is helpful for me. I get to bounce ideas off of you, a great team. But what just popped into my head was asking AI to help create multiple versions of some kind of a chart. Meaning if you have a series of relationships that you're trying to describe or show or illustrate, financial services, again, there are so many processes and many of them are very complex and they happen with time as a component to the process. And I've never done that. I've spent a lot of time trying to come up with creative ways to make a complex process come across visually.
Wow. Yeah.
And I wondered if that was the kind of thing AI might be able to spit out, you know? So
yeah, wow. How cool would that be?
Right?
I can completely understand that. Even I was working on something yesterday where I had like a training solution and I needed there was lots of different components. and I need to like communicate to the client so they understand how all the different components fit in with each other. And I'm sure like the finance charts you're dealing with would be a lot more complicated, but even that for me, I was like, how do I visually represent this in a way that's easy for them to like straight away, as soon as they see it, understand how everything fits in. So that's a great idea. It'd be so cool to see whether it could do that. I know I've seen it do like, I think I was watching a Devlin Peck video and he was using ChatGPT to make like tables and storyboards, and like it was all organized in different rows. So yeah, it'd be really cool to see whether charts could happen.
So whoever's watching this video later,
yeah,
put your solution or your thoughts about this.
Yes, how good would that be? Yes, comment below if you know how to do that. That would be incredible for us to know. So please comment below. Good one, James. You need to be on all of our videos. It's so good. All right. Anything else on the relationship with the human and AI? All right. Next question, Vic, I reckon.
What are some ways human-centered design projects you've developed have resulted in effective or measurable learning transfer for learners?
Okay, so we do have a really cool example of this happening recently. So we can't share the details of the project because of client confidentiality, but I'll explain it in the best way that I can. But we did a human-centered design process with this client. And what they wanted to do is there was a potential behavior happening towards people that could cause serious harm. So people were being harmed, it was causing trauma. And the goal of the training solution was to get people to notice people that might be going through that trauma, to identify what it looks like, and to report it to the right person if they had a suspicion. And the training was helping them to do that. Originally, it was a team that was taking phone calls and reports for that behavior. When we applied human-centered design, like spoke to the people that were needing to report, understood their world more, and created the solution, what happened was, and this is such a cool example of human-centered design in action, is the team who were taking the phone calls and the reports, they became inundated with phone calls, reports coming through. And from their end, they originally saw it as like a negative thing. They're like, we can't like handle this many reports. Like we need to hire more people. This is like, it's so stressful. But what we saw when they were explaining that to us is that the solution had actually worked. They knew how to identify things were wrong. There was probably lots of trauma and these things happening out in the world that weren't being reported because people weren't aware how to do that. So that to us was like so much evidence that the process had worked. So that's probably a recent example that was, yeah, for us, like we're like, wow, that is incredible that sort of outcome actually happened in the business. That's the main one I can think of recently for us. Does anyone have any that, like, has anyone applied human-centered design and had any impacts that they would like to share with the group? Because it'd be great to like tap into everyone's experience and knowledge.
I'll jump in. So my background is simulation, around using a lot of technology with simulation, and more recently role players and actors and that sort of stuff. And all of that was very much human-centered. It was, you know, humans interacting with humans to get outcomes. So within the training sessions, you would actually see by the end the participants demonstrating the behaviors or replicating the behaviors that we wanted to see set out from the front. Now, my challenge at the moment is moving into more of an instructional design e-learning space, trying to get those same sort of outcomes when you're disconnected from the learner. So that's the thing, the sort of challenges that I'm going through at the moment, and trying to work out the best ways to do that, and where it is, you know, that return on investment for the client, that sort of stuff, or that measurable point to say, yes, we can see behaviors have changed, a bit like your phone calls coming in and that sort of stuff, to go, yes, here's a definite indicator of behavioral change. So that's my challenge at the moment to find those things that actually reflect those changes.
Yeah, definitely. So when you were doing the simulations, you were face to face with people. So is that what you're saying? You could see what they needed and if they needed additional support or feedback or.
Yeah, exactly. And then using actors to adapt to each individual's
oh wow,
skill
that's
level
so cool.
and where
That's
they're getting
awesome.
to and that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, very cool. Well, yeah, I guess so when we started with human-centered design, not all clients were on board with it. So they didn't fully understand or want to incorporate human-centered design. They're like, just do the normal training thing, like just do what you've always done. So for us, what we did was we incorporated small parts of human-centered design. And I think even like doing a persona, or like the persona is probably the simplest thing you can do, where you really step into the shoes of the end user. And then every decision that you make through the instructional design process is based on that persona. So you'd be asking, would this scenario that I'm making, or would this sentence motivate the end user based on my persona? And I think even by doing that, like you can notice small changes and like more uptake on solutions, more people changing their behavior. So I think if you just start using activities, empathy map as well is another really good one that can help you basically determine what you would want people to be doing in the future when the project goal is met, and then making sure you're incorporating the exact scripts that you want people to say, exactly what they should be doing, what they would be thinking or feeling in order to be motivated. And I think you will naturally see improvements in the instructional design that you create or the programs that you put out.
That's awesome. I need to learn all these things.
Yeah, you don't have to take it on all at once. There's so many, and that's the cool thing about human-centered design. You don't need to apply absolutely every single thing. You could even start with just a persona, and that can have such a big difference on your project. So yeah, not being too harsh on yourself and trying to do it all, but just incorporating some of it, I think is so valuable.
Yeah. I'd like to comment on both what Hannah said and Ash said. First, I wanted to say, with regards to the project that Bell Vista did, the exhibition of changed human behavior that was evidenced by the results of that project are so important. The changing human behavior is almost always something I'm talking about at the very early stages of any project with my stakeholders, because it's not a common way of thinking for people that are rooted in an industry and feel like they know the content and they just want to push content out to the learner. And they aren't thinking so much about the role of the learner or their individual needs. They think of themselves as like, I am the encyclopedia of knowledge and it's just my job to give that to you, and then you do something with it, right? So talking about how you're going to change human behavior is really important. And you guys did that. You changed human behavior because you suddenly got this huge influx of people responding to the learning. And combined with that, you obviously had a great communication program going on, right? Because it wasn't just about them being aware, taking the training or the learning and then applying it. It was being aware, having that many people aware in the first place, and then taking advantage of it and then applying it. Like, all of that is huge, right? So I wanted to say that's fantastic and great evidentially based solutions. And the reason I asked the question was because it's, I think, really helpful if you can give examples to people when you are in a planning meeting or a project, the opening of a project. If you can give people a variety of examples to demonstrate the value of human-centered design, it helps them sort of get on board. And I think getting people on board, especially like me, I'm a freelancer now, so I have all different clients and I have to create my relationship and forge bonds of trust and convince them I know what I'm talking about, and perhaps convey the idea that we're going to do things a little differently than they're used to. So yeah, evidentiary based solutions and examples are really helpful to me.
Yeah, 100%.
And then to Ash. So Ash, I've been where you are in the simulation space. And from a technology standpoint, I worked for a company that That was a big part of what they did, was they created technologies that their clients were required to use. And because it was finance, there were costs and there were risks, and them being able to understand and use the tools effectively was really important. And typically they had been creating these solutions in a very linear way. They'd basically been identifying the goals and the objects and the tasks, and they'd been just presenting all of these tasks as sort of standalone things, and presenting them linearly. And the problem is, if you look at the real world use case of these people at their various client firms, they weren't performing these tasks and having an equal amount of difficulty with each one of the steps. There would usually be one step in the middle of a 10-step process that they were getting wrong. And so I proposed one day to my client, I had forged that bond of trust and she was willing to go with me on this. And I said, I want to create for you a solution that shows your application, but provides only guidance in the form of introductory, kind of like when you open up a new app and it sort of shows you like, here's where things are. Now do what you will. And beyond that, they could do whatever they wanted. They could move their mouse to the button that they always clicked and they could see what would happen. And they were given sample test circumstances to see if they were doing it right or if it was going to break, you know? And there was no, like, you have to you have to go through all of these tasks. You have to complete all of these objectives in order to master and say you've learned the course. Because that, in effect, is creating training for training's benefit, right? Who benefits from that? The people who created the course. You get to say, hey, I have had, 80% completion rate on this course, right?
Yeah.
But what matters is the end user and the human at the other end. So give them the ability to get straight to the thing that they're having a problem with and design in those stories or solutions that are going to be tied to the greatest risks, right? Because you also want to prioritize, hey, if they get something wrong that has to do with client information, well, that's bad. But if they get something wrong that costs a client $100,000, that's terrible. So let's make sure that we're prioritizing that. So I just wanted to say non-linear design and really putting yourself in the user's shoes and giving them the ability through the use of your training to teach themselves what they most need to know. It was something that worked really well.
Wow. I love that, James. That is so cool. And so that makes, like, that is the perfect example of what we are always asking ourselves, how could I reflect the real world? What's the best decision I can make right now that can reflect the real world for the learner? And what you've said, like, that is just on point, because like you're enabling them to do exactly what they would do in the real world and giving them feedback based on that. I think that is so incredible. Like, yeah, so cool. I had a couple of other thoughts about that. In terms of like getting people to see the behavior change, another thing that popped up into my head while you're talking is the value of user observations. So like putting yourself in your user's environment, watching what they're actually doing relevant to the goal. For example, with the process you were talking about, James, you might be watching them do what they do and you can see where they're going wrong. And they're like, okay, so that like 80% of people aren't completing the process properly and they might not even be aware of it. So I think if you do that user observation, you record what you see them do, and then you create a human-centered solution, let them practice, help them change. Then you can record, like, after this process from observing them a second time, this is what we saw. So I think that's like another way that you can see the behavior change happening, and it like really reflects the real world because you're actually observing them in person. So that's like another really useful way of doing it as well. And thank you so much for like talking about the change that we got through that project, James. It was something like we were really super proud of. So thank you for that. And you were completely right. It wasn't just like, it's not just a training solution. There's so many other touch points that you need to consider when you're designing a solution. And we're including a lot more of it in our solutions now. But for example, like communications, whether it's emails, thinking about like drafting an email for their leader to send to them, or what meeting could their leader hold with them to motivate them to do something different. Putting up like posters, creating like Microsoft Teams chats channels and logs and things like that. So it's definitely, that's a very good point to bring up. It's not just a solution. There's always so many other touch points that you can use to change behavior, and human-centered design can help you figure out what those touch points should be based on the learner's world. For example, if they're always on their computer, they're always looking at emails, email might be a good one. If they're out on the field or they're a truck driver and they don't ever use technology, how else might you communicate to them, whether it's a sticker on their truck, or yeah, whatever it might be. So I think that's another example of the power of human-centered design and using it to create a great solution. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up, James. I was like, oh God, so many little ideas coming up. It was very good.
Can I, one other thing, if Ash doesn't mind, I know this is, it's he and I and Bailey on the call, and I'm conscious of time, but I wanted to say in response to what you said, your current challenge was, you were talking about how to translate the kind of training that you had done in the past into something that was, say again what your current problem is, like what your current challenge is, because I definitely have thought about it.
Getting the same impact as the simulation face-to-face interactions in the e-learning space.
So I would say very simply, since I so often found myself removed from the end user, most of the solutions that I would design that were geared to, that were in an e-learning context, it's like you're twice removed, right? You might not have access to the end user when you're creating the training. And at the same time, when they're taking the training, they are completely by themselves and alone with the training. So using branching and asking questions in the training that allow them to, similar to the nonlinear design, find their way to the content that's most important to them is key. And circling back to something I said earlier, that sometimes doesn't occur to people who are presently very knowledgeable and are doing the work that they think of as your subject matter experts, is identifying what are the things that are going to have the biggest impact on them and making sure from the end user standpoint. And that's something that you can eventually get from a subject matter expert if you can get them to go back to when they didn't understand it. Right. That's one of the challenges, right? Is getting somebody who is so steeped in something that they don't even know what they know. And they're not used to thinking of the end user by putting themselves in their shoes, right? They don't remember what it was like. So again, if you don't have the ability to figure out what all the pain points are, you come up with as many as you can by putting yourself in the mindset and in the actual practice of the participant. And then you design elements into the course that give them the ability to zero in on that. And then to take that a step further, don't think that your e-learning solution or even your series of e-learning solutions has to be the be-all, end-all answer in this moment in time, and nothing else is ever done. If you're setting to work on what is going to be a big project and it is intended to cause behavioral changes for a long time to come, create some courses that your participants can take, and the way they go through the course and the things they choose to interact with then help give you the data you lack, right? So you start observing the way people are interacting with this very sort of high level preliminary content that has all this different stuff in it. Let them tell you what they found interesting or decided what was important, and then you use that to go back to your subject matter experts and say, hey, we've discovered that of the 10 things we thought could be important, these 5 are what everyone seems to be interacting with, and the other 5 nobody cares about. So now we can build our e-learning course and know that at least we're building it on a topic that's important to the end user. So that's what was coming to me when I heard you describe your dilemma.
That's awesome, James. Thank you.
Sure.
Love that, James. That's so cool. Made me think as well. So a project we're working on at the moment, we So when you run user interviews, it can get you like similar information to what you were talking about, James. So we're working with a client at the moment, and so we share the project goal with them. So we speak to the end users, the people that will actually be needing to change their behavior or do something different. We say, this is the goal that we're trying to achieve. For example, we want leaders to hold effective performance conversations. That's what we're trying to achieve. So you can speak to leaders, and then what we do is we say, do you find that goal important, first of all? Yes or no? And that helps us like tap into their motivation and engage them in that way. And then we also say, like, tell us what makes it challenging now. And then they give you those points. It's challenging because of this, it's challenging because of that. And we get the context from them that we can design against. We also ask, do you know how to do it now? And they might say yes or no. If they say yes, we say, how would you do it? And they might tell you, and it could be the wrong way of doing it, it could be the right way of doing it, but you really begin to understand what they need in order to close the gap. So that's another thing that you could try as well, Ash. Do those user interviews with them, find out what's important to them, find out what challenges they're having, what they would need to change their behavior, and then just ensure you incorporate that into the solution. But I think that's very similar to what you're saying, James. So we're on the same page, I think. Awesome. All right, we've only got 4 minutes left. Does anyone have a question they would like to ask before we finish up today? It's been so good. I just want to say as well, thank you so much for the interaction. Like, this has been incredible. It's so good when you jump in and like you ask questions and share your thoughts. It makes the experience so much better. So yeah, thank you so much to James, Ash, and I think Bailey as well for contributing. It's been really, really cool. But yeah, any final questions before we finish up today?
Just an easy one, and I should probably be able to look this up. When is the next cohort after the July one?
Victoria? October, is it?
October, yeah.
October.
Awesome.
Well, I hope anyone who's watching this video after the fact, if you've missed the next cohort, you look to see if you can't get part of the one that's happening in October.
Yes. Yeah, it's honestly like the feedback we've got from those cohorts is just incredible. And we've designed it in a human-centered way. So it taps into like, you've got the practical activities that you can use. You've got the role play so you can observe and see what it looks like. You've got connection with your peers, support from them. You've got individual coaching with Kim. And a lot of you know what Kim's all about. You've seen her on YouTube. I think, James, you did an episode with Kim, so you know her pretty well. But yeah, she's an absolutely incredible coach. So if you do want to take your skills next level, I highly, highly recommend checking out the cohort. We're going to put the link in the description below, so check it out. We've got our July cohort starting on Monday, and then October's our next one. If you have any questions about the cohort, please don't hesitate to contact us on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming along to this session. Vic, I think we got through the pre-collected questions, didn't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming along. We are almost up for time, but yeah, check out the cohort. It was awesome to have you all here. Thank you for everyone who signed up for the recording. And yeah, we will see you around.
What's up, awesome human? Thank you on behalf of myself and the Belle Vista Studios team for continuously choosing to learn with us. We really appreciate it. If the tips and the insights and the context resonate with you and you want to take your skills to the next level, or you want to make your life way easier, you will love our Creator Hub. The Creator Hub is a place for people like you and us. Basically, it's the stuff that we use internally at Belle Vista Studios, and then we just share it publicly with you. The Creator Hub is created by instructional designers for instructional designers, and what you'll love there at the moment is we've got a quiz, could I be a better instructional designer, that has so much tips in the feedback if you're interested in human-centered design or just taking your skills to the next level in terms of the solutions you're creating, the problems you want to solve. But in there as well, aren't we cute? That's us. But we've got the coaching courses, freebies, give us gratitude, and also we've got some templates. And basically they're always around the lens of learning experience design, instructional design, and e-learning. So a human-centered design focus is very much what we're about at Bella Vista Studio. So putting your learners at the heart of a solution and creating something for their needs. So there's the human-centered design stuff, and then we've also got the business stuff. So this is the stuff they don't teach you about when you want to become a freelancer or a consultant in the instructional design world. So go check it out. The link is in the description. You can check out everything that is available for you. Thank you for choosing to learn with us. Continuously invest in your skills. You will be rewarded as an instructional designer. Share this stuff, share it with other people, because when we are better instructional designers, we create better solutions that create better humans, that create a better world. So we have a very important role, and I'm excited to be on this journey with you. Have an awesome day.